Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I've got an opportunity to work on another one of Scott's flea market finds. This is called the Shenandoah Emperor. It's kind of interesting, Shenandoah being in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Not aware of any of them that are emperors. May have something to do with this was made in Japan. This has an interesting issue with it other than just probably needs a really good tune-up. This bail is sticking right here. So it doesn't complete a trip. The cone off that bail wire is bumping up against the case. You can pull it through, and there is spring on this, so it's not a fire issue. What it seems to be is that the arm right here is bent inward. And so I think we can correct that by rebending that outward. And I also notice that the bail trip here, which should be sitting perpendicular in right angles, is very much off. Well, we're going to play around with this reel. We're going to see what we can do to make it work, and we'll also see what makes it work. And that's kind of what we'll be doing today as the daily project. So thanks to Scott for sending it in. To all of you that are interested in service and repair of fishing reels, if you'd like to learn a little bit about how and when and where they were made, and learn a little bit about the designs and the like, well, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use that notification button. That'll let you know when I'm posting. And you can see if that's a fishing reel that you would find interesting. This one I'm going to date to the late 70s or 1980s. Japanese reel making was at its height then. They were making a lot of trade reels. Trade reels being, well, it got branded for different companies under different names. Not quite sure where or who made this one, but that was a popular thing to do back in the day. And underneath this is the relatively simple reel. You have a main gear driving a stud on the back of the main gear. That'll push the axle shaft up and down. The outer rim, the gear teeth, will drive the rotor around. Well, we're going to take this off. It'll get cleaned. We'll do an inspection to figure out what the issue is there with the rotor, and we'll get this out hopefully to Scott to go fishing. To remove the axle shaft, you pull that pin, and this is a good time to tell you to take pictures. It's very easy to invert this crosswind block because everything else looks the same other than the pinhole is up top. Well, if you put it to the bottom, this reel will not work. It'll bump up. All right, we want to see if we can't grab our axle shaft and pull that up. And at some point I'm going to have to put a glove on, but my hands are sweating right now and I can't get a glove on before I started that video. Well, there's a lot of just blistered paint here. That's not good for a line, not really good for a reel either. A little later we'll go do this, but best thing to do with blistered paint is just accept that it's not going to get shiny again. Use a, in this case I'm using a razor knife, but you can just see it's all crumbled. You want to get that off of there because it's only going to foul the reel. And I probably should have put down a paper towel or something else to catch these chips as they were flying. Maybe I should have put a hazmat suit on, I don't know. But if you leave it without doing this kind of work, it's going to be abrasive to the line itself. So we'll do this. I'll come back to it later. You don't need to see me scraping paint all day. It's almost as exciting as watching paint dry. Yeah, I get it. But what we will do is I'll take some steel wool and I'll get out the edges of the paint that remains. And that way we won't have to worry about breaking line off to the coarseness of that those chips. All right, take that off. Let's see if I can get. I know the black gloves don't show up as well, but the black gloves, for some reason, when my hands sweat, I can get on, where the white ones I can't. Okay, we've got that off. We'll just leave that assembly off to the side for a moment. I'm going to pull the crosswind block off now, and that's got a whole host of old grease on it. So I'll take a paper towel and we'll clean that up. And off the crosswind block, clean it off the bench. So these are definitely 1970s style reels, and you can tell that most of the time because it's all metal construction. So in the 80s we started seeing the introduction of graphite, and you also don't have a lot of ball bearings in this reel, and you started overloading on ball bearings in the 80s as well. Alright, I'm working to get the rotor off, and well, one of the things I want to do here before I go too much further is disconnect this handle, because if I go any further it's going to be hard for me to do that. I'm going to hold the rotor and turn the handle in the opposite direction of the crank. This handle has also got blistering on it. We'll address that later. Take the pictures along the way. You're probably not going to find a schematic for this reel. Pictures will help. If you take a picture there, you're going to notice that there was a washer underneath that handle. We want to see if we can grab a nut now for the rotor. That looks to be a 12 millimeter. I need to find a 12 millimeter socket. You need a deep socket because this thing is sitting low in the bowl. This is not what is commonly referred to as a skirted spool. This spool is inside. Another dynamic in terms of aging the reel. Most of the reels in the 80s started to go to the skirted spool, which was the over rather than inside the cup type of an arrangement. Alright, it is a 12 millimeter. There's a keyway there to hold your rotor on square. I'm going to knock that keyway out if I can. And another thing I notice here is this bowl is just full of sand. Well, this is kind of interesting because Scott really doesn't find too many of these sanded ones, even though he's in Southern California, and even though that's got the ocean and the beaches and the sand right near him. Most of the ones he's been finding have been clean. I'm sure this one was just a curiosity to him. Figured try to stump me in terms of seeing how well we can do or not do with this. And I'll tell you what, he's doing pretty good at that, isn't he? Alright, we've got to rebend this. This has been broken. It's also going to help us to fix that. There's a screw here, a good place to take a picture. I always recommend taking pictures of the reels as you take them apart, because if you trust your mind, well, you may or may not be successful later on. We're going to pull this. There's a spring set up inside here that I noticed. I'll take it off and hopefully we'll be able to keep that spring for a moment to show you how it goes. You can see the spring laying here on the one side. It was tucked under this arm on the other side. This takes a little bit of bravery when you're unsure of the reel. Well, you can see that should be 90 degrees, and that's nowhere even close to 90 degrees. Here is that spring now. I can take that out. That has a loop that sits around the stud. This goes against the wall, and this little angled piece is going to go inside here on that lip. Well, the easiest thing for me to do to bend it, and I'm off camera and I apologize for that, is put it in a vise and then just grab a piece of pliers and just rebend it back. So that's the way it should look. And with repeated banging, I mean, that thing's been used an awful lot in terms of acting as a trip lever. And when it does, it does eventually wear out of shape. Let's get all that old sand out of there. And then we're going to see what we can do with this side now, because this, as I mentioned, is hitting right there, which says this part is bent here. So I'm looking, and I pre-loosened this. Don't think it's as easy as it is to do that. I'll try and see if I can't get this off now. I may not be able to. Take these parts and keep them out of the way because, well, they tend to get damaged. All right, well, that seems to be rusted in there pretty good. But I have an idea of what I'm going to do with this. So we're going to use a pair of pliers to lever this out. Try my needle nose pliers if I can find them. Got too many tools on the bench at the moment. Well, while I'm doing this, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button to see when I'm posting and what I'm posting. And you can, if you do that, you can make a judgment as to whether those are videos you want to see. Alright, well that one wasn't grabbing very well. Okay, I was with an absolute and utter failure trying to do it that way, but I was able to get the nut off, and well, now we're going to test to see if we have full swing. Well, we have full spring. So that says this bent piece here is the issue, and you can see how it's bent. So we're going to continue to try. Now that I have that hole open, I think I might be able to use an awl to bend it back to shape. Kind of interesting way to do this. But again, I'm looking for clearance. So you have to bear with me. This is not an exact science here. If I hold this, so this reel probably got either banged or dropped or something else happened with it that caused that whole thing to push in and out. There we go. Look at that. That's going to straighten it right up. Using what you can find as alternate tools. This should take the clearance now and give me what I need to clear that hump. Okay, the only thing that I need to do a little bit of, this is kind of by eye, so who knows, just a little bit of a tilt there to match this back again. It looks pretty good. Alright, there's a little washer that went with that. And a little nut cap. And this may be the biggest issue of this whole service here. It's trying to diagnose an oddball bail problem and to try and make that work. Well, believe it or not, I used my pliers. I hate to use pliers on nuts, but that was seemingly the only way I could get this one off before. Now look at that, we have a proper space there. And now the only issue is that the bail wire needs to be adjusted because there's too much tension on it. That's a bent bail wire. So what we'll do now is we're going to kind of play around with it. I'm going to shut the camera off. There's no sense watching me bend these things. But we will come back to this and I'll show you what the results were. Okay, well, we've been able to free that up, and it was only a minor bend. And just when I bent this, it changed the dynamic on the reel just enough to cause me to have to rebend it again. All right, so we've got a snapping bail. Let's go ahead and put this back together then. We've got that spring that we noted. Now we want to take our trip lever, which was squared up. Let's make it easier in and out there. It does. Line it up over that screw hole and take your screw and get that started. And then what we need to do is we need to take this spring here and work that around, and I guess that's probably why there's a hole in the bottom of the rotor here, because it takes a little bit of playing around with it to get it underneath that lip. Okay, well, so here's what we did. We had just a slight rebend realignment over here. Now you can see we're much higher than that bump. We've reinstalled the trip lever with the right angle, and I found that the way to put that spring in was to load this and then work from below. It got a lot easier to do it that way if you happen to have one of these. Well, what do we have now? We have a mousetrap, just the way it's supposed to sound. You'll notice that the spring on the other side is resting against the inside wall there, and this one is doing everything it wasn't doing when it came in. Let's finish the rest of the reel now. Again, My hands have gotten sweaty. I needed to take them off to do that, that alignment with the spring. I can't get a glove back on, but I do recommend that you use gloves. To get to the pinion gear now, you only have a bushing in here. There's nothing else. Take the washer off and push the main gear through. Pinion gear through. Now you push the main gear through. And what we can see here is there's a lot of slop and old grease in here. Well, that's the next step. And I'll risk getting all of this on my hands, but sometimes best intentions, right? We also have an anti-reverse dog that I just noticed over here that I should have turned off. I did not. I got lucky that it didn't pull off, but that's your anti-reverse dog. We're going to need to clean under that as well. I'm going to use the penetrating oil to loosen all that old greases and dirt. Then I can wipe it off with a paper towel. Get all of that off the inner workings. That'll speed the reel up. Same thing on this side now. We're going to want to take a cotton swab or something else to clean off all that old gunky grease and dirt there. And then what I like to do is use a hard brush to pull through the channels in the teeth, getting all the old grease out of that as well. Final mop up here with this paper towel. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to grab that cotton swab and work around the case where we have the accumulated dried grease. And that, well, I just noticed we have a little washer here. Make sure that you account for that on the reinstall. Let's clean that up, clean the old greases around the anti-reverse dog and the collar. So this is a 0 ball bearing reel. This reel has a lot of old technology in it. The case is serving as the bushing. And we don't have those old, or the newer versions, anti-reverse clutches and things like that. Just a nice solid reel. And I would say it was value priced at the time. Anytime you got a store brand, generally it represented a value price to, say, a Daiwa of the time or a Ryobi or something like that. All right, one more piece here, and we can put this all back together again. And Scott, you're going to find that you have a darn nice reel here. Interesting, and a great thank you to you for sending this in for an education to all of us in terms of what this reel is about and how to service it. That bail certainly was a challenge. Bails are everybody's bugaboo. Nobody likes to work on them, and while they fail when they get bent, this one was probably dropped. All right, a good amount of grease onto your pinion gear. We remember that the washer went in, and now we want to do the same thing here with the main gear. We're reversing the order that we took this stuff out. Grease onto the main gear shaft, grease onto the teeth. And in this case, that stud that's offset there is going to be driving the crosswind block that allows it to ride in the center of the reel. So what we want to do with this one is we want to get grease onto the face of that as well. Take your main gear and install that in the case. Let that slide back. Take your washer and slide that under, and the best way to work this next piece is upside down on the reel. And then invert your pinion gear and put that in. And that's the pinion gear up top. There's a little bit of sand in there. There's sand all over this reel. Next on goes that washer. Then we can put the newly refurbished rotor in. And look, find the flat side of the pinion gear. There's only one. It's a D shape. And we can put the pinion or rotor nut back on. Start these by hand. You want to do your best that you can by hand with these. You want to reverse the throw on our wrench so that we can tighten this and then tighten it down. point we should have an operational reel that spins nicely. There you go. All right, we have that reel set. Next up then is the crosswind block. There's dirt in the back of that. You want to clean that out. And we're hearing a little bit of sanding in there, and well, that's the unfortunate things with reels that get sanded. No matter how much you clean it, every now and then you get a little grain that's making a bit of noise. Generally speaking, it does wear away, but if we get some, I won't be surprised. I'm going to remove the adjuster nut now for the spool. Bring the spool off if I can. I need to find an ear to push that out. We've removed the spool. We'll service the spool in a moment. We want to get some light grease onto that after you've cleaned it. I'll come through the top of the reel. And then through the crosswind block. Find the hole in the rotor, or crosswind block rather, and align that hole with the hole in the crosswind block, right there. And then get the long pin that's going to hold that in place. We can take our handle at this point, and the handle unfortunately has got all those burrs on it. But the only thing you can do is what we did with the other one, just use a knife to scrape some of that off. It's less important here because it's not going to touch any line or anything, and you're not going to touch it. Install the handle. Remember what we said, take those pictures. There's a washer there. Now I use a parts tray, so that reminds me when I look into my parts tray whether there's any pieces or parts that I didn't install. All right. You should be able to see. Look at this. Wow. Hey, Scott, you got a nice reel here. And it's not even making that noise associated with the sand that I thought it might make. Let's go put this side plate cover back on. That's a little piece of aluminum there. So we have a metal reel, but we have a, well, aluminum's metal, but different type of metal. And you can tell that this is a lower end reel because these screws don't appear to be stainless. Align the other two holes, get those in. Shenandoah Emperor. Now I gotta look a little bit more. Kind of an odd pairing of words. One more side plate screw. This reel is about a 50 size reel. It would be appropriate for deep lakes, pier, fishing from a boat, inshore ocean. It's heavy enough to handle that. All right, let's figure out what's going on in this drag stack then. I'm expecting to see either Teflon or like a cork material in here. It would still be in that area of manufacture. There's a 5-sided ring that holds that on. Leave that on my table. Hopefully we'll be able to pull these out. Okay, we got the cork washers in here. And boy, are they cemented in. That's why we couldn't get it out. These washers are swollen. I'm saying washers, but there's only one. And it's swollen to both sides of this metal. I'm trying to separate these and being aware that we have a very fragile piece here. Okay. And they doubled up the washers for some reason. You can put grease on these. That will keep them flexible. They are permeable. And we'll do that. I'm going to put our tie-down metal washer on top. clear that channel and make sure you can put your 5-star spring in there, because that's going to sit in a groove in a channel like that. And then, as promised, I said we would take some steel wool, just try to buff the rough edges off this paint. This is 4.0 steel wool, and it's appropriate for polishing. And again, you could do as much or as little of this as you want. I did notice that we knocked off a couple more chips there, but yeah, that feels pretty good. All right, so let's put this back on. We'll give it a final test. We'll get this back to Scott to go fishing. There's a D side on this. There's one flat side. Find the flat side on your metal washer. Go ahead and put that down. Grab your adjuster button. And I think what we saw here is basically the anatomy of a basic trade reel circa the 1970s, early 1980s, made in Japan before they started going to Korea and then on to China. These were made as store brands, or sometimes called off brands. And here they're called trade reels. And well, this one, I'll tell you what, it's a nice reel. We're in the performance on that. Let's put that anti-reverse back on. Love it. Final test of our bail trip. Look at that. What a change, what a joy, what an effort. The Shenandoah Emperor fishing reel with the bail set the way the bail should be set. And we found out it was all because of a bend in that arm there. And the trip lever, well, set how it should be set because that was bent as well. A little bit of reforming. We got a reel that can go fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please like it. Again, if you like these types of videos, please subscribe. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do. Your efforts truly are appreciated. All fire, all rescue, all first aid, police, and so on. Thank you for everything it is that you do. To everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this. This is quite a lesson in the history of trade reels from Japan, and this one's ready to go fishing again. Speaking of that, I hope you keep your tackle ready to go fishing. The bite's on. Make sure that your tackle is ready to go so that you don't miss the opportunity to go catch some fish. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.